Good morning!
Good morning.
Yet another lovely day with more technical problems.
What's new?
So exciting. You know, it's the worst kind of troubleshooting is when things aren't consistent. You do the same thing and you get a different result, and it's extremely frustrating. But we are here, and we're only a couple minutes late, and hopefully people will be able to find us. But how are you doing today, Daniele?
Good. How are you?
Good. I was gonna say something about your mustache being different, but
Oh.
you know,
Mhm.
you're not Ryder, I guess is the point.
Yeah. You didn't change my label.
Oh wait, hold on. Let's see. Hello, I
Hello.
am. This is words. Words are hard. This is What the Hell is Water. I'm Reed Garcia,
And I'm subbing in for Ryder Richards.
also known as.
Danielle Garcia.
And today is Friday. Woo,
Woo.
Friday. Wait, let's get a DJ A-horn for that one. Oh, it's Friday, November 19th. What a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Yesterday, do you know what we talked about yesterday, Danielle? I'll see if I can quiz you like a quiz grinder.
Oh, I do know what we were talking about yesterday because I was watching, and it was marriage and altered marriage.
Yes, but actually, more specifically, it was relationships.
Yes.
Marriage, it would be one of those things. But yesterday we had on a guest, Eric Wooten, from his company is called Altered Marriage, and it's spelled ALTAR to make a reference to the altar that you stand at a lot of times when you are getting married. And he talked with us about his three pillars that he uses: intentionality, community, and personal responsibility. And we talked a little bit about those, and we talked a little bit about a handful of other things. And it was, for me at least, a very engaging conversation. It's really interesting to talk to Eric. He's been counseling people for years, if not decades, and he's seen a lot. And so it was good to pick his brain a little bit, and we're going to have him on as a repeat guest because we know all of you out there have some sort of relationship, and whether that's with a romantic partner or not, you hopefully are relating with at least some people, and so it's good to know some of the things to do to have a healthier relationship. We gave a couple of tips for that yesterday, and I'm sure we're going to be digging into that a lot more. So if you have something specific you would like to learn about relationships, please let us know. You can post on any of the comments. Today we're live on, if it worked, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can also go to our website, helpfulforlife.com, and you can hit the contact us button in the top right. And again, if you want to remain anonymous, that is perfectly fine. Just let us know within your comment, and we will go from there. So yeah, so that's what we had yesterday. And then we had a challenge yesterday, which I'm unfortunately blanking on. I didn't have it in front of me like I thought I did. So we'll come back to that one.
Yeah.
But
I don't remember either.
yeah, but for today, Danielle, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to do a Free Spirited Friday and tell some of our RV stories.
Yeah, I like that idea. So this is going to be part of a recurring series that we do, where we talk a little bit about our travels. And, you know, one of the things that we wish that we had done, but we didn't do the best of, was posting more regularly about
Or at all.
or at all about our travels. And really, that's more selfishly for us than anybody else. We've taken a lot of pictures, but we don't have any kind of write-ups or things like that. You know, Danielle has some journals because she always has journals.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, speaking of journals, what do you know about journals, Danielle? Do you have anything about journals that you'd like to tell us?
Oh, well, I'm starting a free journaling challenge. So you join my email list, and then every morning I'll send out, probably by like 3 a.m. or something. So regardless of where you are when you wake up, then you can have a journaling prompt to journal for the day, and working on a little guide of all the different styles of journaling that I've tried out. I got back into it in 2016 with bullet journaling, really. And then my diarizing process, as I call it, has sort of evolved since then. So you'll get to take a look at the pages of my diaries and see how I journal for personal development and growth tracking and all those good things. So if you want to join, just go to my website, DanielleMGarcia.com, and there's a link in the menu for join my free journaling challenge. So that'll get going.
Yeah, and for people who've never journaled before, why would they want to do this?
Well, first reason I like journaling is because it just kind of freaks me out how much of my own life that I've already forgotten. So really, when I journal, there's so many times I go back and read things and I'm like, oh, I didn't remember that I even wrote that, or I didn't even remember feeling that way, or oh, I think so differently about that topic now. So it's really cool to see how you change yourself, and then also other good things. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I I never really kept much of a journal myself. The first time I tried it was when I went to South America with my brother. We went to South America for 3 weeks, and before I went there, I was like, this is going to be, if not a once in a lifetime trip, a very unique and special trip that I want to make sure to remember. And so that's actually when I got into photography. I was like, all right, I'm going on this trip. I need to buy a camera. So I bought a camera, and that was the beginning of my journey into photography. And then I bought a little journal. And maybe one day we'll bring my brother Stanton on, and we'll talk about that. That could be fun to share a little bit about what South America is like. Because if you're like the average American, you probably have no idea about South America. And to be frank, neither my brother and I didn't know that much either before we went. So we learned a lot, and it was a really cool experience and a really cool place. So I really enjoyed having that journal. And it was funny because my brother kept one too. And we both had a different tone in our journal, which was amusing because his was very lighthearted and funny.
He's done some dramatic readings for us.
Yes, he has. So maybe we'll bring him on to do some dramatic readings. I have a couple entries in my head that I think would be just very, very entertaining. So journaling is a cool practice because, like she said, it allows you to help remember the things that were going on, and also you'd be surprised. Like, you don't necessarily need to write down word by word every little thing that happened. If you have a couple of things to help jog your memories, between journals and photos, it will bring back a lot of things, and you'd be surprised how much you got floating around in that noggin. When you get the right cues, it helps you remember. And the reason I'm so confident in that is because I started using a digital notebook software earlier this year called Roam Research, which, if you're a regular listener to the show, I've brought it up a handful of times already. But it is a digital note-taking software that does a great job of basically being wired out like your brain is, so you can have all these links and easy ways to remember. I remembered that one little thing, and you can kind of pull on that thread or follow that scent, and you can easily kind of track back and see where your head was at that day and find the things you need to find. So I've started using that a lot this year, both for work and for personal stuff. And honestly, it's changed the way I think. So I'm going to tell you guys more about Rome as we go forward. But for today, let's talk a little bit about the RV. So have we talked about the RV at all on this show yet, besides the fact that we did it?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, for those of you who haven't, who are on video, you can see up here in the middle, we have a big picture of Danielle in an RV, and I believe that's in Utah, if I had to guess. Do you know?
I was going to guess that too, and that's actually the panorama that I just shared on my Instagram stories was from Utah too.
Oh, nice. So if people want to see your Instagram, what's your handle?
So it's Danielle M. Garcia, but the I and the E in Danielle is a 13 because it's one of my lucky numbers.
Yeah,
along
so
with Taylor Swift.
DAN13 LLE
M Garcia, GARCIA.
There, thank you. And I will also grab that one, put that one in the chat for you guys. And so Danielle, why don't you tell people about the beginning of our RV journey? Like, what do you remember about how it all started.
Well, I actually do have a blog post about this too, because that was one of the questions that we kept getting from everyone was, how did you decide to do this RV thing? And um, yeah, we don't really know. We can't really remember, but I know I think it was January 2018, and we were talking about what we wanted to do next with our careers, with whatever was next. And then we were driving to a friend's house on a Friday night, and in the car, we were in traffic and on the 405. If you're, in the know of Californians, we Reed looked over and he was like, "Hey, so," and I guess you'd been doing some research for starting your own online business, starting to like be aware of the world of digital nomads, as they call us, working from anywhere, trying to make passive income. And I guess we stumbled across some people who were RVing full time, and you said, "Hey, so I figured out what we're gonna do with the rest of our lives."
I said it just like
Something
that.
like that. I
Okay.
mean, maybe just so I figured out what we're gonna do next in life, or I don't know, but I think it was something dramatic like that. And I don't like making decisions really, so I was like, "Wonderful, tell me, tell me the plan." And then you were like, "We're gonna sell everything and move into an RV and travel around to all the states." And I was like, "Okay." So then talked to my boss. We decided, I guess in March for my birthday weekend, we were going to a wedding. So we decided to rent an RV to try it out, just to make sure that, in 3 months, changing our entire lives wasn't going to go totally haywire. And yeah, so I guess we started with renting in March. Do we have pictures to look at? Or how are we
Ah,
doing that?
yeah, that's a good question. So yes, just full kimono with some of you guys here. We had a last minute change of plans here, so this is a little bit of us thinking on our feet. So I'm looking to find the said pictures and get them shared. But yeah, why don't you tell me a little bit about that trip? When we started. So why do we even rent an RV in the first place?
Because we'd never traveled in an RV before. So we're like, we probably shouldn't buy one before we've even taken a trip in one. So, uh, yeah, we were going to that wedding, and it was just up the California coast. I think it was Paso Robles or somewhere around there, like wine country. So it was probably around like 3 or 4 hour drive from where we were south of LA. And uh, yeah, I mean, a lot of times, I guess now renting an RV is probably way more expensive than it used to be. But I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I don't know either, but that's okay. The main point is that's step number one. If you're somebody who's considering doing an RV, or even if you're not, it's a cool thing to at least try out, and you can do it for as little as a night if you want to. I would recommend doing it at least for 2 nights, if not longer, because by definition, if you're gonna have to go pick it up and then you're gonna have to go turn it in, like that's gonna take up parts of your day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's good to do a weekend or a long weekend so you can get a little bit of experience. One, you can see what it's like to drive the thing, which one of the other most popular questions we get. And it, what would you say about that, Danielle? Before I answer.
Well, I would say that the RV we rented, I did not like driving as much as the one that we bought. So the one we rented was a Class C RV, which is like where the the front of it is a pickup truck with, it looks more like a U-Haul, I guess. It has like that cab that goes, or no, the thing that goes over the cab and then connects to the back of the RV. So basically, when you're sitting in the driver's seat, you have that either storage space or bed that is above you, and I just felt like I didn't have as much visibility in that RV as the one that we got, which was like a bus. It's a Class A RV, so it has like the really wide front windows, and there's nothing over top of you. So I just felt like I could see a whole lot better when I drove that. That was my first, my first memory of driving the rented RV was driving in traffic in north of LA, coming like back through the city. And I feel like the lanes are all narrower on LA highways than they are around here. I don't know. But yeah, I was just I felt like I didn't have all of my driving senses that you're normally reliant on, I guess. So that was.
You didn't have all your driving senses with what?
With the RV that we rented because of the thing that came out over the cab, so I felt like I could see less.
Okay. Well, yeah, maybe that's a little bit limiting because it does hang out over your head a little bit, but it's pretty much just like a truck. It's like a truck, but you have kind of a little bit of a canopy over your head, kind of in a way. And again, like the great comparison is just like a U-Haul. So if you've ever driven a U-Haul, that's basically one type of RV, and that's called a Class C RV. Mm-hmm. Class C, like the letter C, and then the words RV, not a CRV like the car. So maybe you found that one a little bit more limiting. Personally, I disagree with that. I don't think it was. I think maybe that was the first time you're driving, and it was in LA traffic, and so that was maybe some of those factors got you a little bit more anxious or whatever. And then having that kind of cut off your vision upwards.
Well, and you couldn't see out the back, whereas
so there is the part out the back, so that is a little limiting for sure.
Yeah.
But as far as the part above your head, I mean, 99% of the time, unless you're going up going down a big hill or something, you don't need to necessarily see above your head. So it may make your field of view a little smaller, but effectively it doesn't really affect your driving. But it can definitely affect your perception. I mean, that's obviously how you remember it. Mm-hmm. But I guess that's one good point to know. So the other kind of RV, which is the kind that, there's multiple, but one other kind of RV is what's called a Class A RV. And that's the kind that we had. And the way I like to describe that is basically like a bus. If you see like a city bus or something like, not a school bus, but more like a city bus, the ones that have a flat face. Mm-hmm. And so there's a big, like the windshield is basically, 60% of the front of the vehicle. I guess you can look here, right at our RV. We have yes, the easiest way to show pictures. It has a very flat front, and then really big windows on the side too, and then it has the big old side view mirrors. And in that one, and in ours, like you can see out the back, but you're looking 30 feet down a hallway through the little small rear view mirror. So it's like okay, but it's not as good as a rear view mirror like in your car, right?
Right, but you can still see like if there's a car behind you or not, or if it fell off the tow dolly, or
Yeah, yeah. So tow dolly. Why don't you tell people what this tow dolly is that you're talking about?
So we were going to tow our car behind our RV. So in order to do that, sometimes you can do what's called flat four, where there's all of the wheels of your car are on the ground. But in order to do that, you have to have four-wheel drive, I think, or something like that. So if only my Jeep was four-wheel drive, then we would have kept it instead of your car. But we kept Reed's sedan because, anyways, we sold my Jeep while we were in California and then drove just like following each other to Texas, where we researched and purchased a tow dolly so that goes behind the RV. The RV tows the dolly, and then the car, you drive up the first two wheels onto the tow dolly and strap it in. And that way you're just driving the RV. We could both be in the RV. And yeah, that's basically what a tow dolly does.
Yeah. So put simply, a tow dolly is essentially like a trailer. So for those of you who have absolutely no idea what we're talking about, so first off, an RV stands for recreational vehicle. It's basically a mix of a house and a truck, and the um, basically. Sorry, I got distracted by dinging things. The the way that the house and the truck are basically it's a truck that they put a house on top of, right? And so in that house, there's especially in the bigger ones, you've got bathrooms, you've got showers, you've got kitchens, you've got couches, you've got beds, and the whole idea is you can basically you're a house on wheels, and so you can go wherever you want and have that flexibility, which is I think the main reason why it was attractive to us. Like, hey, we could travel and we could take our house with you, and the best thing about the RV is you don't ever have to pack and you don't ever have to unpack. Once you're in the RV, you take all your stuff with you, and for me that also meant my Xbox and my nice 46-inch TV or whatever we had up at the front. So it doesn't all have to be about cooking s'mores and nature. Although we did both of those things plenty, there was also just some real life. Us being on our computers doing some work, playing some video games, cooking dinner and things like that. And for ours, we had a 3-burner stove and a microwave and a sink. So we ate pretty much like we eat normally. So that was an important thing to us. But anyway, so that's what an RV is. And so we started off by telling you about a couple of different kinds. One of them is called a Class C. And so now I'm going to share on the screen here. So if you're audio only, you might want to come check it out sometime in the future. But here's some examples of what some Class Cs look like. And as you can see, there's a little thing that hangs over the top. I hate how Google Images works. No, I don't. Oh, man. So anyways, there's a little overhang on the top, so you can see what that kind of looks like. And as Danielle was mentioning, she felt like that was a little bit limiting to review, and you can see how that hanging over the top kind of cuts into the top of your field of view. And
I felt like I was driving trying to come out of a tunnel constantly. Like that's what I felt like.
Yeah, and to be frank, I didn't feel any difference at all really from driving a regular car. And that was basically what I was going to say about the RV. The main thing is they're made to drive on the road. So keep that in mind. Like everyone does that. And if it also, in America at least, there's some stereotypes that old people are bad at driving. And guess who drives RVs all the time? Old people. So if old people can do it, you can do it. And if you're an old person, you can do it too. So yeah, it basically feels like driving a truck. The only difference is you're a little bit longer than usual, right? And so there are a couple of
just a little bit
longer. There's one or two small things you should keep in mind, but that's neither here nor there. So that's the Class C, and then the Class A is the one that we talked about, which ours is definitely not this nice, but you can see it has kind of that flat face thing. And the Class C is literally it's literally a truck that is manufactured somewhere, and they just don't put on the rest of the truck. They just take the bottom of the truck and then they put on the house part basically. Whereas a Class A is completely built separately. So a Class C, for example, the body, the truck could be made by Ford or something like that. Whereas this, they take truck parts, but they do it a complete separate body. And then one other type is called a Class B. And the Class B RV looks basically like a van. If you've ever been in like a van coming from the airport, or you've heard the term Mercedes Sprinter van, like those are some good examples of what a Class B looks like. And so I have that on the screen now too. Another way I'm thinking about it is maybe like a small food truck or an ice cream van. If you've seen the ice cream vans come around. So Class Bs, the nice thing about them is they're a little smaller, and they will get better gas mileage, and they are basically a van with a different kind of body on them. But the downside is they're a lot smaller. And so for the bathroom, like you're lucky if you got a little basically telephone booth sized bathroom. And a lot of times it's like, oh, here the shower is like a little handheld thing, and it
comes out like over the toilet.
Yeah.
That's my memory of touring Class Bs was like, yeah, you slide open the bathroom door and then you're showering over your toilet all the time, but I don't know. I'm clearly partial to the type of RV that we got.
Right. And that's the thing. Choosing an RV is a very personal choice. And it is kind of up to you, what you like and what you want. And so that's one of my big recommendations is, for me, I wouldn't want to do a class B for a significant length of time, but I think it's great if you're doing like a road trip. I have a friend who they go to a concert across the country, and instead of flying, they take their class B RV. Like that's a perfect type of thing. We go to a concert, we spend a week, maybe a week, 2 weeks, every a handful of times a year. I think that's a great use for it because it's kind of a temporary thing. But if you're going to be living in the thing for months, then I'd like to have the space. I'd like to have the kitchen because the Class Bs, if they have a kitchen, it's just a little small thing. But yeah, so I liked having the extra space, and that was a thing for us. So when we went and we rented the RV, the first one we got, I think, was 26 feet long, and we rented it, and we did it for that weekend. And part of that was, hey, do we think we could do this RV thing at all? Are we crazy? Are we gonna like this at all? And then also some of it's about size and layout. You can look at pictures all day long. You can look at videos. You can even go walk around and at the dealership and things like that. But until you get into that RV, you're not gonna know exactly what it feels like. What's it like when you're moving around? Are you bumping into each other all the time? And okay, I see the kitchen in the pictures, but how does it feel? And how does it compare to my real full size kitchen? Things like that. And so that's why renting was so important to us, and I highly recommend it to any of you guys who are looking to get into the RV space. So then after we got that, we're like, okay, 26 feet, we could do that. That's a pretty good size, but it might be nice to be a little bit bigger. And so that's where we got to 30 feet. And so having that 30-foot RV was great. I mean, it was just me, Danielle, and our dog Lincoln. But we had the ability to have guests, and that was an important part to us, is we could have people over, we could have people hanging out within the RV. And our RV technically slept 6 people. Really more like 5.5, but you basically what happens is the dinette table, which is basically like the kitchen table, it folds flat, and then there's cushions that go on top of it, and then we also had a futon that folded flat. So you got 2 people on the futon and 2 people on the dinette, and obviously if you're big people, maybe not 2, and then we had a full-sized queen bed in the back, and we could walk all the way around the queen bed. So
a queen-sized queen bed.
Queen-size queen bed, yeah. I guess there's no such thing as a mini-size queen bed. The princess bed. So we had that, and then our shower was, big enough to where you could turn around and you could kind of, walk back and forth a couple steps.
Shave your legs.
Yeah, and it was not like a phone booth shower. Again, that would have been very frustrating every day. You're like hitting your elbows and things like that. So yeah, it was a great size for us, and Lincoln enjoyed it too. He's a very well-traveled dog now, and he's very spoiled. He went to a lot of cool places. I'm sure we'll show some pictures of those in the future. But Dog Mountain, Dog Island, to name a couple.
He's been in oceans on both sides of the country.
Yeah, I mean he #blessed Lincoln, man.
Yeah.
He's probably eating bonbons in the other room. Classic Lincoln. Oh, man. Okay, so we rented the RV in March. What's the next part of our story? Oh, by the way, for those of you who are watching us live or want to see the links that Danielle's mentioned, I haven't put them all in the chat, including the last one she mentioned, which was the story about how we got into the RV, how we decided to do the RV. And then one other important page is our travel log, and it's called the Tumbleweeds Travel Log. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Danielle?
So in 2018, when we were buying the RV, moving into the RV, we kind of had this idea that we wanted to start a YouTube channel or a blog or an Instagram, something to document our travels. And so we wanted to come up with a cute, clever name for ourselves. And then I think I was rewatching Titanic at some point in March or April of that year. And one of my favorite lines of Jack's in that movie is when he says, "I'm just a tumbleweed blowing in the wind," or like, "You can just call me a tumbleweed blowing in the wind." And I was like, that's pretty much how Reed and I live our lives, because yeah, we just get this idea and then we get caught up in our own winds of change and like don't plan too far in advance and just see where, if you're open to where life can take you, where it takes you. So we called our Instagram Tumbleweeds in the Wind, and then I don't think we ever even started the YouTube channel. But yeah.
What do you mean you don't think? There's no doubt about it. We did not start the YouTube channel.
Well, we may have gotten the link to it, and like we got featured on those other RVers who did like that series about frequently asked questions to RVers, and we were on a couple of their videos on YouTube.
Oh,
So
I forgot about that.
yeah,
We'll have to find that so
I
we can
know. We'll
share
have to
that
share
too.
those too.
Yeah. So yeah. So I forget where that left us off in the story.
I mean, after renting the RV, then we started looking to buy one in April. So, Reed went to tour the first RV, and then we had someone like a mechanic go out and look at it, which is another tip for the RV buying process. So, first tip, rent to try, and then when you are buying, make sure that someone goes and checks out all of the mechanical issues. And then also something that we didn't even know to look for was if you like look at the sides of the RV and if they're like bubbled or buckled, or basically you're looking for like water damage going inside the walls of the RV.
Yeah,
And
we don't need to go through all of the specifics of that, but the point is with that is, you know, especially if you have no experience in this, and especially if you have no experience with car maintenance, house maintenance, things like that. And even if you do, it's good to hire someone who's paid to do the thing. It's like, hey, before I make this thousands and thousands of dollars investment, let me pay somebody, I don't know, $100 or a couple $100 to have them check it out to see, like, hey, okay, the owners told me all these things are good, but can you look at it and see? And they know the things to check for, right? They know all of the both the truck problems, the house problems, all the common things that come up, so they can look at it and let you know, hey, is this something that is worth buying? And they'll come back to you and they'll say, hey, there's a problem here and there, and that's probably going to break in a little while, so you know, maybe you should ask for a little less money or whatever, which you may not be able to do in this market. I don't know what the market's like these days. I know it spiked like crazy with COVID and things like that, but I imagine
yeah,
it's
make
probably
us an
calming
offer
down.
for our RV, and if you make a good enough one, then maybe you could own this very Winnebago. No, just kidding.
It'd have to be a pretty good offer, because the thing about RVs is they're you learn your RV, and it doesn't matter if your RV is new, used, 5 years old, 20 years old, there's always going to be problems. And so just like a house, there's always going to be more things to work on and to fix, and hopefully just those are just small things, right? But once you have your RV for a little while, you get to learn all of those little things, and you get to deal with them, and then you fix the ones that are important to you, and the other ones you just kind of live with and say, oh, maybe one day I'll fix those things. So yeah, unless it was a lot of money, we're probably not going to sell that RV, at least right now. But you never know. If you want to give us a lot of money, then we'll definitely rethink it. So we rented the RV, and then we started shopping for an RV. And as we were shopping for an RV, we had a mechanic go and look at them. And we looked at a couple of them. And I don't want to show the pictures of the ones that we were looking at, because I haven't screened them yet for privacy of the people who we were buying them from. But what do we do after that? So after we looked at a couple of them.
Then we bought one, and Reed went down to San Diego to get it, and yeah, I don't know, brain words.
Well, you know what? Speaking of brain, by your brains, you have a commenter saying, Danielle, I love your hair. And of course, the comment block is blue, which goes very nicely with your blue hair.
Thank
you. So there you go. They like the outside of your brain, at least. So that's a plus. So yeah, so after we bought the RV, we bought it down. I bought it down in San Diego and drove it back up. And then we did some work on it. Fortunately for us, the people who had the RV before us had done a couple little facelifts, because our RV, I think I might have said it before, but I'll say it again. It's a 1999 Winnebago Brave. That's the model number, and it's 30 feet long, in case any of you are curious about those details. And 1999, we bought it in 2008. 2018. So it was about 20 years old, and so 20-year-old RV. And so naturally, some of the things didn't look quite as bright and shiny, and some of the whites had started to yellow a little bit and things like that. But it actually worked out really nice because the people before us had done a couple of facelifts on the inside. They had painted it. They
Took out
had
all the carpet,
Yeah, they put down some linoleum or
wood
something like
panel
that.
looking flooring.
They
Yeah.
put in a nice futon of their own. They reupholstered and got new cushions for the dining room.
Painted everything white. I don't know if
Yeah,
I said that.
and they had done a couple of other things
Mhm.
and added a couple decorations, and it looked very nice. And then it had a really good combination because on the outside, it looks okay. It doesn't look horrible.
It's super, super faded. Like,
The decals, like the little stickers and stuff, are kind of coming
yeah.
apart and things like that. But the way I look at it is like, hey, this is the perfect kind of RV. It's like, it's not so nice where like people are gonna be like, hey, that's a nice RV, you know?
Yeah, the outside looks pretty meh. So
Right,
We're
and
like,
then-
don't steal from us. Go steal from those other RVs that are big fancy down there.
And then also it's like, hey, if we, something hits it or, somebody happens to drive it into a concrete pole or anything like that, then we don't have to be that worried about it. That was a nice thing. Our RV cost us $16,000, which may be
It's less
cheaper
than a lot of cars.
than a lot of people's cars. Yeah. So it was awesome. And the things that it enabled us to do was amazing. So, I mean, and also, I don't know what the exact numbers were, but after you're not paying rent every month, I mean, $16,000. And by the way, we can still have it and can still sell it. It's a pretty good investment. So financially speaking, it wasn't that bad either.
Yeah, I feel like we should edit this out in post and not tell people we only paid $16,000 for it. If we want to get those big offers,
Yeah, you're right. Get this big $160,000. That's what it was. That's what it was. So we had the RV, and then the things I was doing on it to do a little bit of work, and I'm not going to be able to remember the list because, like I said, there's always a list. But I made there's a drawer missing, so or some drawers missing, so I made some drawers, which was a fun experience, and I made a couple of cabinet doors that or a cabinet door that was missing, and I made one of them a whiteboard eraser paint. That was kind of fun, and then I did a couple of other small things which aren't coming to mind, but I worked on it a good bit for a handful of weeks, and luckily I had a friend with a shop. Hello there, friend, who I could park outside his house and use all his tools and scrap wood and things like that. So that made it so much easier, and that was again one of the great areas where I did a lot of DIY stuff and learned a lot. And yeah, there were some. I don't think there were any major mechanical issues. I know there weren't any major mechanical issues, but yeah, again.
Not until we pulled away from California. But
Foreshadowing?
yes. But before that, we can talk about when we were parked outside of our friend's house and we're moving into the RV. I mean, that's probably the next.
Go for it.
Next
Yeah.
phase. And
Well, I guess I'll
Rain.
tell that one.
Yeah.
So we were parked outside of the RV, or we were parked outside of our friend's house. And the thing about Los Angeles, for those who aren't aware, it's basically all concrete and palm trees, and it's very densely populated, and parking is an issue, which was quite the opposite from living here in Dallas, because when you live in the Dallas area, you never have to worry about where you're going to park. Everywhere you go has tons and tons of parking spaces, and if they run out, guess what? The neighbors got parking spaces, so you don't ever have to think about it. Street parking is hardly a thing at all. But whenever we moved to LA, before we moved to LA, I had never had a parking ticket. Once I moved to LA, I think I ended up getting 5 to 10 over the course of time while I was there. And I will say, maybe 2 of those I thought I actually deserved, and the other ones were just ridiculous. And it's crazy how much parking is annoying over there. But anyways, the problem with that too is parking's hard enough for the regular car, much less an RV. And so when you have your RV, your options are, especially if you want to work on it, like you either need to know somebody who's got a spot where you can have it, or you just got to have it in storage, and then you got to kind of go work on it in storage. And also some storage places kind of frown upon that, but it kind of depends on the type of work you're doing and stuff like that. So we were very fortunate to be able to park by our friend's house. However, there is a rule that you're not supposed to stay overnight in a vehicle.
well, before we say this, I was going to ask, what's the statute of limitations for vehicle dwelling?
Is that what you were worried about, really?
No, I was just deciding because first we had it in storage, right? And then we moved it to our friends after like when we were moving from the house into the RV, that was when we took it out of storage and started living in it. But I was trying to remember because there was like this whole thing with the storage place where the spot that they give you, if your RV is 10 feet wide, your spot in the storage unit is literally like 10 and a half feet wide. It was crazy. And then trying to like go in and out of that was a nightmare. And that's what I remember about the storage facility. But then, yeah, once we moved to being parked outside our friend's house, it was like there was one, I guess, the one morning we were still trying to like downsize and move stuff out of the RV, and why is my brain just failing this morning?
I don't know.
I really don't like this view.
Well, don't look at yourself. So you were saying we parked outside and
well, and there was one night where we were going on a walk, and we were walking back up to the RV, and there was a cop car outside, and a cop was like knocking on the RV door, and so then you like ran ahead, and when I stayed back and held Lincoln and like talked to the cop, and I guess someone had called and said that we'd been parked there for too long, because I guess you were supposed to move your RV or move a car parked in this neighborhood every 2 or 3 days, which we had been doing. We'd been like filtering it.
So let me finish defining the laws real quick. So
okay.
The laws are, they don't want you sleeping in a vehicle, and that's an average place like Texas. Honestly, it's probably not that big of a deal because one, there's so much parking everywhere, and it's not that big of a deal. But it's definitely a problem in LA. One, because parking's already so scarce, and two, because LA is so expensive. A lot of people like, you hear like, oh, I lived in my car for a while I was struggling to make it or whatever. And also there's issues with homelessness and things like that. And so depending on where you live, there may be stricter or less strict laws about what's called vehicle dwelling, which is, are you allowed to stay in your vehicle overnight? But also just by nature of what it is, it's kind of hard to enforce because, unless someone's sitting there watching you like stay in the thing overnight,
or neighbors recording you
or something like that, there's not really a way for people to know that's happening, right? And like they really want to put a squad car out there and watch you, and also like, hey, oh, I was there until super late, and then I left and I came back really early. Like that's where it kind of gets a little like, hey, how do you really prove? So it's kind of harder to it can be harder to enforce as well. But also there are concerns. Like in this case, we were staying in a neighborhood. And I get that as someone who lives in a neighborhood, you don't want somebody literally moving out on your street. But fortunately, we were able to have the RV there, and we were not living in it, at least at first, while we were working on it. But then when it came to the very end, right before we were about to leave, there were a couple nights I think we slept in it, and then the cops got called on us one day, and we're like, okay, whatever, we'll move. And so we ended up moving, and the areas of town where parking rules are a little more lax and allow that type of thing,
vehicle dwelling allowed,
are naturally, one, they're more limited on how many places allow that, but two, in general, they're probably not quite as nice of areas of town. Hence why one of the reasons we were trying to avoid it, and the other one was just being next to our friend and their shop, which was really nice. So we went and did that for a couple days before we were able to leave town in the RV. But before we did the actual leaving town in the RV, where did we go? What was our first destination in our timeline, Danielle? Which actually isn't on our timeline here.
Before we left?
Think where does an RV
How did we go somewhere before we left?
In the RV before. So we started this grand adventure where we wanted to travel America. And there's one spot in America where it's not advisable to take an RV because there's a big ocean in between.
I was like, what are you talking about? Hawaii. We went to Hawaii because we had a friend who lived there, and they were going to be moving back to the continental U.S. And so we were like, and we were about to leave LA. We're like, flights to Hawaii are cheapest from LAX, so we're probably never gonna get this chance to go to Hawaii and stay with someone. So it was like 1 week. It was 2 weeks before my last day of work, and I was like, oh hey, we're gonna buy flights to Hawaii and go to Hawaii for 5 days or a week or whatever it was. Literally, like, so we were in Hawaii for a week, and then I was gonna have my last week of work and then end. But yeah, we went to Hawaii as our first state to mark off not in the RV.
Yeah, in Hawaii, Hawaii was fun, wasn't it? I enjoyed it. What did you think of Hawaii?
Yeah, loved Hawaii. I feel like, yeah, I'm wanting to like click through pictures and
Yeah. That's what
Yep.
about what I was about to transition to.
Yeah.
So Hawaii. Where was the first spot we went? Where did we fly into Hawaii, Danielle?
Gosh, well now I just feel like you're quizzing me on my memory. Maui? We go Maui first.
Close. We went to. I don't know. I walked away. We went to Honolulu. We flew into Honolulu, which is on the island of Oahu, and then while we were there, we spent a few days, and then we also went to Maui as well.
I thought we did Maui first and then
I guess we
Honolulu.
didn't find our pictures. Well, the short answer is I don't think we're going to be able to get a good way to view the pictures because we have a lot of them, and I don't think there's an easy way for us to be able to browse through them today without having done the pre-setup. So we're not going to be able to have pictures, but why don't we just talk a little bit more about just the trip as a whole? So we started in Hawaii. We did the we flew there. We did not take the RV there. And then we started traveling around in the RV, and we did that on and off for about a year. And then after that, that's when we came to where we are now in McKinney, Texas. And yeah, so as a whole, Danielle, so we started at the beginning. So we started off this episode talking about how we got into the RV and why we got into the RV, which was not exactly on a whim, but it was kind of like, hey, this is a fun idea. Let's try this out and see where it goes. And if nothing else, it'll be a fun experience. And then after that, we decided to come settle down here. So what did you think of the overall experience, Danielle? I mean, probably I know for a fact before that year, neither of us had said, hey, let's go do an RV or let's go live in an RV or travel in an RV or anything RV. Neither of us had any experience with them at all. Neither of our families had done anything with them. So yeah, now that you've done the experience and you're on the other side, what'd you think?
I liked it. Why is my brain just not coming up with engaging stories right now?
Well, sometimes you need the prompts from your journals and your photos to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we did like it. We enjoyed traveling a lot, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, was it? I mean, what parts did you not like? I mean, were there negative things that came from the RV experience that you weren't quite as big of a fan of?
Yeah, so I guess whenever we first started traveling in the RV and we were going to we'd crossed over the California border and we were in Arizona, and then it was like the first night that it was either like the first or second night out of California, and we had to stay in an AutoZone parking lot because there was like the check engine light on, and you'd been working like throughout the day with one of the AutoZone workers, like coming out and trying different stuff and buying this tool and trying that and then going back. And it's like, it was just, that was probably the first night where I was just like, I've had it. I can't deal with this anymore. Yeah.
You couldn't deal with it because, you had been doing so much work on the RV and doing all the hard mechanical stuff and dealing with the AutoZone
No,
guy.
just watching you doing it was stressing me out.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. It sounds pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, and then I was always worried about like when the RV wasn't working, if the AC wasn't working, then it was hot because we were leaving in May or June. I guess it was June whenever we left. And so yeah, June in Arizona, it was like 120 degrees outside. We're in Tucson or wherever we were driving through, and so I was very worried about Lincoln overheating.
Yeah. And the 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 AC, was it starting to have issues at some point?
Yeah, so it was having issues, and then it totally broke when we were in Missouri in August. So that's probably like the hottest month. And then, yeah, it was a very, very warm Midwest.
Yeah, the thing about air conditioning is you don't realize what it's like and how, I don't know, for lack of a better term, soft you are until you go without it for a little bit, right? And but for me, one of the things was, and tell me if you disagree, is perfectly fine. Actually, kind of once you got used to it, once that was your new norm, sure, it was kind of uncomfortable, but you just kind of dealt with it, right? And a thing that pops in my mind is a lot of people who live in the South, and especially in places like Mississippi or Houston, where it's like it's really hot and humid, and it's like, hey, if you go outside, like you're just gonna start sweating, and people just know, like, and then in the summer at least, right? And Missouri's not too dissimilar. It's like, hey, it's hot, and it's like, okay, well then, you start to go some of the older techniques, which are open up your windows, try and get a breeze, get some fans going, and so we did some of that stuff, and we survived, and I was able to replace the air conditioner motor, and then it got nice and cold again, so that was a nice welcome reprieve from the heat. But yeah, so it sounds like there were a couple of things about the RV trip that maybe stressed you out a little bit, maybe gave you a little anxiety. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably. Well, moving into the RV, like so it was a crazy week. We were finding a roommate to come replace us in our house. We lived in a house with four other dudes, and well, maybe there was one girl at that time. And my last day of work was the day that we had to be out of the house and have the roommate move in. And we were still planning on having a garage sale the following morning. So Saturday morning, like we were moving all the stuff out of the roommate's room who was coming in to replace us so that we could push it out on the driveway the next morning. So technically we weren't out of the house, but whatever. And then we were driving our roommate's truck, like the truck bed. We were just throwing stuff in it and driving it over to the RV that was parked outside of our friend's house. And we had like our mattress in there, a basket of gifts from my coworkers, and pillows. And I was like, this is gonna all fly out the back of the truck as we're driving it over to the RV. And I was just like seeing like Final Destination scenes of like, oh, my basket of gifts bouncing on our mattress and flying out the back of the truck as we were driving it over to the RV. And I just started having all this like panicky thoughts, and it was just a lot. And then I was like one of those like freaky breathy crying where I'm like, Reed, you're stressing me out, and why can't we just do it how I want to do it? Because like, and then Reed was like, it'll be fine, it's not gonna fly out of the truck, we're gonna drive like 30 miles an hour on these neighborhood roads in Redondo Beach. It's not like we're going down the 405 with all this stuff flying out of the truck. And yeah, it was fine. But there were a lot of moments like that where all of the like planning or preparation starts to feel overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, it kind of makes sense, especially for that first week, is like, hey, there's a lot of change going on, right? You're going from, we both had two very stable white collar jobs that paid very well, and we were living in a nice house, and we were living a very good life. We were very happy. Didn't have financial issues at all. And then Reed had now quit his job by the point. So Reed had quit his job in July of 2017, and what we're talking about now is June of 2018. So it was around March we started to look at the RV, sometime in the March April timeframe where we did the the trial with the rental, and then now this is so our lease went through May, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to mention, so we're moving out in a couple weeks, and then we say, okay, we're gonna go to Hawaii for 9 days or 10 days of 1 week before we're moving out. And oh, by the way, the house we lived in, it was a 5-bedroom house, and we had done a decent amount of the like furnishing and the kitchen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a lot of the common things in this big house, were from us. So we had a decent amount of stuff that we had to deal with, and then there's like, hey, roommates, do you want to keep this? If not, we're gonna sell it. And so there's some
Mm-hmm.
of that kind of thing, and a little bit of drama there. And then it's like, oh, now let's move out, and then move all of our stuff out onto the driveway and have this sale. And then it's like, oh, then the cops come on our door, our RV, and then we move to the
Yeah.
sketchy part of town, and then
Both of our bikes got stolen.
Yeah.
One night, the first bike got stolen off the back of our car, and then the second night that we were in the vehicle dwelling sketchy part, the second bike got stolen. And then, yeah, you just start to feel like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm so conflict averse, and every day is so many conflicts that I introduced into my life by making this choice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, and I think honestly that's a very salient point there, and that's one thing that brings mental health to mind for me, right? I've heard people. Actually, I don't know if I've heard anyone say, but to think, oh, I don't have anxiety or I don't have depression, and thinking it's like this state that's like it's on or it's off, like it's binary, like you do or you don't. But the way I view mental health is, it's more like cycles. We all have these cycles where we're going up, down, we're going up, down, and it's just about where is it going up and down around. For some people maybe it's a lot lower, for some people maybe it's a lot higher. But your life situation and what's going on around you affects that. And so somebody who has a bunch more stressors in their lives, and much more things that may cause anxiety or make people feel unsafe, or things like that, those are going to be more triggers. They're going to be harder for someone to deal with than somebody who's, frankly, living a cush life with dual income, no children, nice white collar jobs, making plenty of money. Like, to be frank, we didn't really have any problems, right? And we didn't have a ton of conflict or things that came up. So one thing we were doing was voluntarily introducing a bunch of stress and anxiety and things like that. And these things are more and more triggers. And so that was, one of the big things for us throughout this trip was learning how to deal with that kind of stuff. And of course, this is just our story, right? And I will point out that, I don't know if you guys caught on to that timeline there. We started talking about an RV in March, and then we left in June within 3 months. That short, and neither of us had any knowledge at all about RVs. So a lot of that time was me spending researching, trying to figure out what it's about, what kind, all the things, because there's a lot you should learn before you do that thing. And some people spend years planning, and some people have it do decades. Like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to do this. But no, we had about 3 months. And then it was like, okay, and we're learning some things as we're going. And then we have all these things come up. So it adds a lot of stress. And yeah, and then you got to figure out how you deal with it. And so it was a great experience for us and for our marriage, because we got to see, okay, how do we handle ourselves with the stress, and how do we handle each other with the stress? And yeah, I mean, frankly, I was pretty happy with it overall. There are certainly some times where, and when I say this, I mean how we handled our stuff. But yeah, there were some times where I wasn't happy with how I handled things, and maybe there are times you weren't happy with how you handled things. But we grew a lot. It was a little bit like a pressure cooker, so you get to realize real quick, and it's like, oh, okay. I come back a couple minutes later, and I'm like, I was stressed out. I didn't have, my tone wasn't very nice there. I recognize that probably wasn't very good, but I'm frustrated from dealing with this AC unit or whatever the problem was at that time. And so, yeah, so that was one of the big parts for me with the RV was, yes, the traveling and stuff was great and amazing. And we're going to show you guys all sorts of pictures from that in a future episode, if you will. But one of the big things it took for me was just dealing with all those stresses and getting a more solid relationship with you. And yeah, I mean, one thing is Danielle and I, at this point, this is 2018, we'd been together for 10 years already. And we'd been married for 5 of them. So it's not like we were new to each other. And so that was one of the things like, okay, we're going to go live in this thing and be around each other 24 hours a day. What are we going to talk about? I mean, we've talked about everything by now, surely. But that's the thing, you know, when you put yourself in that situation and you're there all the time, like you surprise yourself, like, wow, I didn't know that about you, or oh, I haven't heard that story, or oh, you've been feeling that for a long time, but we've never talked about that before. And so that was probably the thing that I'm most thankful for about doing the RV is it advanced our relationship. I think 10 years, something like that, even though we only did it about a year. Because, you know, a comparison to make is, hey, if you have a relationship with someone that's long term, you see them once a month, you know, that year may not be the same as somebody who is seeing somebody regularly every week. And that may not be the same as someone who's living together. And that's not going to be the same as someone who's living together in an RV with all these stresses and all this kind of stuff. And they're on top of each other all the time. So just like the more intense the situation, it's kind of like making diamonds, right? The more pressure, the more things like that, the better it can be for you to come out of the other side. So there's my little monologue on it.
Yeah, well, it is especially like I'm thankful for the same thing because especially after how many people literally said to us, "Oh wow, you're moving into an RV with your spouse. Hope you don't get divorced."
Right? Talk about encouragement.
We were like, okay. That's the perception that happens of because yeah, it was like someone like, oh, I just knew someone who moved into a sailboat with their spouse, now they're divorced, and it was like, oh gosh. But yeah, I'm glad that it was the pressure cooker for a stronger relationship.
Yes. Well, we could think about it like a rice cooker, you know, the rice came out nice and fluffy.
Sure.
I don't know why that's different, but you know. Well, you know, I remembered the challenge from yesterday with the help of a friend. So the challenge from yesterday was to pick a relationship, a significant other, friend, family member, your parents, and set up a weekly meeting with them, or maybe maybe the frequency will be different for you, but especially if it's a significant other or someone you have a serious relationship with, I think weekly is a good amount of time to do that. And the idea of this weekly meeting was for you guys to be able to discuss things, to be able to talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and hey, I'm trying to work on this thing about maybe it's my tone, or maybe it's how I'm coming home and showering before we hang out, or maybe it's whatever it may be for you in your situation. But having that time every week where you can talk at a regular time gives the time and space for you to have those discussions. Kind of similar like we were talking about here with the RV. By us being together so much longer, we had more time and space and opportunities for us to have these discussions. Well, you know, sometimes it's good to be intentional about it. When we were talking yesterday about his 3 pillars, one of them was intentionality. And so a great way to be intentional is to schedule this regular discussion. And he called them staff meetings. You can come up with whatever fun name you'd like. Another thing I referenced yesterday was the tradition of Shabbat, which is a Jewish tradition on Friday nights where the family gets around the table and, among other things, they talk about stuff. And having that regular kind of pressure release, we were talking about pressure cooker. Well, if you press the button to release the steam to reduce some of that pressure earlier on, it will prevent it from getting to a higher point where it might just pop, right? And so with relationships, it's good to do that on a regular basis. So that was a challenge from yesterday, and that's honestly I think the challenge nearest and dearest to my heart that we've had so far. So even if you've done none of the challenges so far, please really consider doing that one, because I honestly think that can make an extreme difference in your life and in your relationship. And I know just from, you know, my walking through the world, that there's people in my life who I know could have benefited from that and still today could benefit from that. And so I'm pretty sure that you, either yourself or someone you know, could benefit from that. So please share that challenge with somebody if you think they could if you think they could benefit from it as well. And for today, so just a quick recap of what we talked about today. We had a little bit of a last minute change of plan, so we had Danielle come on here and we started to talk about our RV stuff, and we shared a couple links in the chat for you guys to check out. We have a blog post by Danielle about how we got into the RV. She told a little bit about that story for us, and then she talked. We also shared our timeline, which is called the Tumbleweeds Timeline. So Danielle told us a little bit about why we called ourselves the Tumbleweeds in the Wind. We also have an Instagram called Tumbleweeds in the Wind. So if you guys want to see some pictures, you can look that one up. And then we started to talk a little bit about how we bought an RV, and we gave just a little bit of a primer of the different types of RVs. And then we gave a little intro to how we started to transition into the RV and some of the feelings that came along with that. And then we ended with some of our takeaways and the things that we really enjoyed about the RV. And that was us getting closer to each other, and which is kind of coincidental since yesterday was about the relationships. So for today, do you have any challenge that comes to your mind, or would you like for me to come up with one?
Just a journal challenge.
Oh, that's right. Thank you so much for mentioning that. So yes, Danielle, one of the other links we shared was Danielle's journal challenge she came up with. So tell us one more time what that is.
So it's a free daily challenge. You'll join my email list and then get an email with a journaling prompt that you can respond to in your own journaling practice every day.
And, don't let me correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the main thing with this journaling challenge is you don't need to have some big 5-page long thing or sit down for 5 hours every day while you're doing this. It's going to be very simple, and it's really just about getting started. And maybe that's just 5 minutes a day for you. So it's a great way to start this challenge is to go to our website, daniellemgarcia.com, which we've also included that link in the chat, and look for the journaling challenge up in the menu bar. And as you're doing that, just the thing about journaling is it's going to help you better know yourself, and it's going to help you better remember things. And as you're telling stories, you have pictures and journals to reference, or if you're not telling stories, just for yourself. It's good to look back and to know and have record of. And oh, by the way, just by writing something down, it changes the way your brain works with it. So we'll talk more about that another day. So your challenge for today is go do that journal challenge. Go sign up for that journal challenge and try it out, especially if you're someone who's never done journaling before. So yeah, go do that. And other than that, y'all have a wonderful Friday.
Happy Friday!
Happy Friday!